How are you today? This is Josh Patrick, and you're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. And my guest today is Danielle Levy, or is it Levy? I don't know. Levy or Levy. We'll find out soon. Uh, and
Mhm.
she is, her company's called the Boardroom Link.
Leak.
And did I get that wrong too?
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay. I do that all the time. You have to excuse me for this. I can't read my own writing. um, and we're going to talk about being the right fit, and that's where we're going to start off the conversation. So let's bring Danielle in. Hey, Danielle, how are you today?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
So let me get this straight. How did I massacre your name?
You did okay. I've heard worse.
Okay.
Heard worse. Yeah, it was fine.
Is it Levy or Levy?
It's Levy.
Okay, good. And the name of your company is the Boardroom. I got the last word wrong.
League. Yeah, the boardroom league.
League. Boy, that just sure doesn't look like League the way I wrote that, but that's okay. I apologize for that
Okay.
too. So you work with CEOs and you help figure out whether you have the right person at the right place. Am I correct there?
Yeah, I work with CEOs. We do a lot of like health diagnostic of their business, right? And part of that is figuring out if you have the right team members and are they doing the right kinds of things.
So can you go into that a little bit more about what does that mean and how do you do that?
Sure. So I use a three-part framework. And the example that I generally use is think about your favorite hotel or favorite restaurant. There's three parts to it, right? You walk in, there's the amazing lobby that has the fresh flower display. If you're lucky, they'll give you an apple or something. There's the concierge, ready to show you your table. That's the front of the house of the business. That's how people are seeing you, that's how they're experiencing you. So that's your sales, your marketing, your PR, your visibility, all the things that the public knows about your company. The house is the thing that makes you money, and it's the reason that you're in business. It's the great idea that you had that you want to, share with the world. And then the back of the house is, again, just go back to that hotel example. It's all of the people that make it happen. So it's the wait staff and the housekeepers and the booking service and all of those things behind the scenes. So it's in our businesses, it's our legal, it's our accounting, it's our HR, it's all of that. It's the business of the business that makes it actually run. And so when I'm looking at businesses to assess the health of their systems, that's the framework that I go in with. And what I find when I'm working with my clients, it's kind of like coming out from the doctor's office where they're like, "Oh, your cholesterol is bad, but good job, you lost those 5 pounds," or whatever it is, which is great. But I think with the business owners that I work with, it's a continual process of needing to go through those health checks, right? Because you can get an A plus in something. Well, you can get an A in something and push it so far to an A plus that it creates another problem, and then you're automatically back down to an F, right? So systematically, by your business continuing to grow, you're constantly having to do these health checks to figure out where each piece is given the season of the business that they're at. Does that make sense?
Sort of. So can you
Okay.
give me an example of what that might look like, going from an A plus to an F?
Sure. So I have had clients that have had very small product offerings that have done really well. So an example of that would be, like a $37 product or a $97 product or something like that. And they get incredible feedback and they're running that system so well. And they say, let me expand that into a greater program or a greater course, or, take the next step in creating that item and bringing it to market. The problem with that is just because you want something to grow, it doesn't always grow with the same secret sauce that it initially had. And so you have to kind of figure out how to recalibrate that. A very specific example that I'm working through with a CEO right now is that her business has grown to a point that she can't do anymore. She can't take on any more one-on-one strategy work with her clients, which that's a very happy problem for her to have, that she really needs to be handling some other pieces of her business, that she has a team that can totally support her. But in making this transition, we found that the secret sauce, that was the thing that kept the customers coming back, was getting missed because it was very innate to who she was and her skill set. So we're working through her company right now, figuring out how do we either replicate that or figure out another way to produce that, to bring it to the mass audiences. So that's an example of something that was very, very successful, and we pushed it to the edge. And when it went over the edge, it actually kind of um, went south on the report card.
So what is I assume from what I'm listening to is that the folks you work with are primarily information companies?
I actually work across a lot of different industries. I work in education and finance and communications and marketing. I work in, I have a client right now that actually is in the food business. Really, I think that's one of the fun parts of my job is that I get to go into a lot of different businesses and a lot of different phases of their business growth across a lot of different industries.
So with this process, where do values fit in?
Um, Values is such a huge part, I think, of every company. So I am of the belief, and I know that I'm not alone in this, that critical to any CEO's success or the business success is really operationalizing the core values across the business. So that's really, it's not about getting into a meeting for a few hours and writing down what we either think our core values are or Googling what our core values are, but it's actually having those core values be a living, breathing, um, philosophy that gets drawn on in every single interaction in a business. It's how you run your processes, it's how you treat your clients, it's how you treat your team members. Um, Values are meant to be lived. And when they're not, in my opinion, it really negatively impacts sales and the bottom line.
So how do you get your clients to do that? I know when we introduce values, I agree with you. I think that values-led companies are way outperform companies that don't work that way. So when you introduce this concept to your customers, your clients, how do you get them to actually do it?
Yeah. So a big part of what I do is really help CEOs and business founders take themselves out of the business, right? Most people that start a business, they start it because they have a vision, but mainly they want to work for themselves in some capacity. And I think what often happens is that they end up tying themselves back up into the business in such a way that they can't actually take themselves out of the business, and therefore they can't go on that dream vacation, or if an emergency comes up, the business isn't going to run the way that it needs to, or whatever the situation is that strays from the day to day. And so I think that really verbalizing and living out those values is the first step in teaching the team and the clients to work as an extension of the leadership of the company. And so not only defining but then demonstrating them is the best way to get started.
Okay, so I'm still curious on how you get somebody to do that. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I've always found that I say, okay, we have values, we have clarifying statements. Here's how you use it. And I go back a month later and say, okay, well, how are we doing on values? Huh? What values? Yeah, that's sort of what I hear most of the time. So, how do you get people to go from saying, yeah, I think that's a good idea, and you put together values and hopefully you have clarifying statements around it so people know what you mean? And I'm of the belief that values are tools,
Hmm.
not only values.
Yes.
And getting them to use them as tools has been a real, real challenge for me. So, do you have any hints of what we might be thinking about or what the folks listening to this podcast could do to say, okay, I like the idea of values. I think it's a good idea. I'm going to write some, I'm going to stick them on the wall, and then I forget to do something with it.
Yeah. So, I think that's in large part why I get brought into companies a lot. Um, I as an outside party, I'm not afraid to call attention to when those aren't being really worked on and lived out. I think it's about so I think there's that piece of it. I think it's also about culture building. Um, Giving the team um, the space and the freedom to call out in a really safe way. Hey, we're working here for the greater client, which is the business. It's not necessarily the physical person that signs the paycheck, right? And how are we showing up every day to meet, to exceed every expectation for this business and really driving it through the culture?
So that's an important piece. And one of the things that you said when you're brought in that too many of the people you're working with, the presidents, CEOs, founders, spend all their time working in the business and almost no time working on the business. And we've all heard a zillion times supposed to work on the business, not in the business. But the truth is, if you have less than 50 employees, and certainly less than 25 employees, you're pretty much going to have to work in the business at least a little bit. Uh, so what's your strategy to get people to become what I call operationally free from their business?
Yeah, I think there's many textbook, and I say that quite literally, as I experienced in my undergrad and then in my graduate school years, for how to do that. There's time tracking, there's really thinking, there's doing the exercises. If I assign a dollar value to, this task and that task, and really doing the math out of it, I think those are great exercises. I think they demonstrate a great point. At the end of the day, in my opinion, anything that is a repeatable task that truly doesn't need to be owned um, by a CEO. And when I say that, it's like, signing the bottom line on your tax return, or having a very private conversation with an attorney. Or, I mean, those are just examples. But I think business leaders take for granted that there is a release that needs to happen, that other people can do their tasks in a similar sort of way, or can be coached through to do them as closely as a leader would want them to be doing. And so anything that is, like I said, routine in the business, or isn't specific to the secret sauce of the origins of that business, that only that individual can truly bring to the company, in my opinion, leadership should not be handling.
So, in my experience, the biggest problem why I see folks not becoming operationally free from the business is that the CEO or the owner has not learned how to delegate effectively.
Mhm.
Is that something you run across?
Uh, Yes, and I don't always think it's intentional. I think there's a lot of, "I'll just take care of it myself." I think there's a lot of people not realizing, that they're holding on to things, that they don't need to. I think, I mean, I guess to your point, delegating effectively is a fair statement. But I think it goes beyond just skill, and it needs to be an awareness as well, because I think there's a momentum once people understand the power of delegation. I almost feel like it's a bit of, and I say this in a healthy way, a bit of an addiction.
Well, I'm a big fan of delegations. Mainly because I'm lazy and I don't want to do any work, but that's, that's a
I
different
don't.
problem altogether. Um, so, my experience with that is once I get an awareness, that's fine. And then they go out and they say, okay, I'm going to delegate. And then they come back a month later and they say, gee, I tried that and it didn't work. So I can't do that again. And the reason it didn't work, in my experience, is that they delegated ineffectively. And it's a skill that I don't think anybody ever gets right the first time they ever do it. It's one that takes a lot of practice and has to have a lot of trial and error. And I think there's two things that happen here. One is when people don't delegate well, it's because they don't tolerate mistakes in others, or they don't trust the people they're working with. Have you ever run across that?
Um, I have, I have run across that. I would add a third option, going back to the beginning of our conversation, that are the right people in the right seats. In my opinion, even if the delegation hasn't been done completely correctly, the person receiving that should be aligned enough with the task that's being done to recognize that and be able to be on the pursuit of the full task at hand in order to be able to complete it as best as possible.
Yeah, that's fine if you're working with management, I would think. But if you're running a construction company, and many people listening to this podcast own construction companies or
Mhm.
manufacturing companies, they tend to look at their four people and their supervisors as helpers, not as members of a senior management team. And they just don't, in my experience, they are not very good at allowing others to make mistakes. And they often don't trust their people to do the right stuff. So I have to do this because if I don't, it's going to get screwed up. And then my customers will be unhappy and they'll go away, which is, by the way, not true, but it's a belief system that a lot of folks have.
I guess for me that I am of the belief that mistakes are going to happen. It's
Well,
the
yeah, look at it. Mistakes are going to happen. The question comes in, as a leader in a team, you own a company. When mistakes happen by others, how do you handle them?
correct. And so my position on that, it is up to the leader to demonstrate that this is the mistake and this is how we respond, to the customer. So in the example that you just gave, regarding construction, if if and I'm making this example up, if a bunch of wood wasn't measured properly and now, there's waste that is happening. It's what is being done to diagnose the issue that has happened so that we have the tools in place so that it doesn't happen again. And how are we correcting with the client um, that paid for that product, that we're going to get it right for them. And as the owner of the company, that's a leadership issue.
Yeah, my way of dealing with mistakes, one of the things I like to see people do is ask this question. When a mistake is made, what do we learn?
Hmm. I agree with that.
And a lot of times what I find is that when I go to, I used to own a vending company, I go to a route driver and they make a mistake. And I said, okay, great. What did you learn? And their answer would be, I don't know. And then I would say, okay, well, if you did know, what would it be? And I would often hear, I don't know, again. So then I'd have a third question. Okay, just make up an answer. I don't care what it is. Just make something up. And whatever they make up happens to be true. Now, the truth is, most owners of small businesses, they don't have that skill set. They need to learn that skill set. And they don't even, it's something they know, they don't even know they don't know it. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. They know that, they need to delegate. They all know that. They just don't
Hmm.
know how to do it. And they don't know how to correct it when it doesn't work right. Has that been your experience?
Um, I've certainly seen it. And again, I guess that's job security for me. I mean, I'm not meaning to make light of it, but that's why I get brought into companies, to be that outside perspective, to work with business owners and their teams to figure out how to communicate effectively so that when these issues do come up, this is the protocol that we're going to follow.
So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah. So for me, that goes back to your earlier comments about core values and establishing what those core values are. For me personally, it's about accountability. It's about transparency. I am a firm believer in going above and beyond in terms of communication, and really thinking about, like I was saying earlier, the business as the end client, um, not not people as just doing a job, right? Like if we're serving the true business, truly serving that construction company, if we're truly serving that manufacturing company, and people understand where the comments and the reactions and the mistakes are coming from, it's a lot easier to have those conversations.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So, what kind of delegation strategies do you like to see your CEOs develop?
Yeah. So I think communication is at the crux of a crux of everything. And I think being really in touch with your team, and creating those feedback loops, to occur, is a great starting point. What are the frustrations in their job? What are they seeing that can be done better? Identifying those things will really not only improve the business but help you to get to know your people and what they're really good at. And so when you're building those relationships, you're building that trust, and then you're able to say much more easily, hey, yeah, could you take care of that thing for me? Yeah, if you could take care of that every Friday, that would be fantastic. And I don't think it's about, handing it over and then forgetting about it. I think it's about a training process. So hey, for the next 3 weeks, let's have me shadow you doing the thing. And then for the next 3 weeks after that, I'm going to let you try it on your own. And then for the next 3 weeks after that, so now we're 9 weeks out. It's okay, I'm going to disappear a little further into the background. And so it's a constant conversation of training and trust.
Yeah, that's in my experience, that's a really good way to do that. When you let somebody do it, they'll make some mistakes. We go back and look at it. We correct the mistakes. They go on, and hopefully they won't make the same mistake again. They'll make a new mistake.
Right.
And over a period of time, they'll stop making new mistakes, and eventually the new mistakes become rare, and the new habit is in place.
Yes.
I remember when we used to bring new managers on, I would make them for 12 weeks every Monday send me a to-do list of what they were going to do that week. And after 12 weeks, I stopped because they had developed a habit of doing it. Now they couldn't stop doing it.
Right.
So it's that sort of repetition, getting people to do things, screw it up, not yell at them when they screw it up, which is not a good idea. I used to do that. I can tell you it doesn't work very well. And then say, okay, what did we learn? And keep going that. As far as I'm concerned, it's almost impossible for somebody to make a mistake that works for you. It's going to put you out of business.
Yep.
I mean, they'd have to try really, really, really hard. I had
Yep.
somebody actually almost got there with me, but not quite. And, but the truth is, when they make mistakes, mistakes are great as long as we learn something. The
Hmm.
mistakes that are not good are the ones where we don't learn something.
Yep.
So that's just my attitude about that.
I agree with you completely.
So, Danielle, unfortunately, we're out of time. And I'm going to bet some folks listening are going to want to find you and maybe have you help them. How would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so you can find me. My website is danielleclevy.com, or you can find me also at theboardroomleague.com.
Cool. And I've got two things I'd like you to do. The first is wherever you're listening to this podcast, please give us an honest rating and review. And while you're there, you might as well subscribe. We've been doing this for about 7.5 years now, and every Monday morning at 6 o'clock, a new episode appears in the world. And the second thing I would like to have you folks do is I've been running a newsletter. I've actually been writing it for 45 years, but for 19 years, it's been every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock it comes out. And I call it Josh's Musings, where I just kind of write about what I'm thinking about how you can make your blue collar business better. To get it, it's really easy. Just go to www.sustainablebusiness.co/newsletter. That's www.sustainablebusiness.co/newsletter. You put your name in, and next Tuesday you'll get our newsletter. So this is Josh Patrick. We're with Danielle Levy. You're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here.